Alright folks, welcome back to the channel. You're watching Duty's Daggers. I got a pretty good, interesting video for you guys today. If you've been a part of the knife community for any amount of time, you know that there's a lot of discussion and sometimes argument over classification of blade shapes. And that's because there's a lot that's left up to interpretation. There's so many kind of variations on the classic blade shapes that you could almost call anything anything at this point. But there are, certain blade shapes that are, okay, that's definitely a clip point, that's definitely a Tanto. And then from there it kind of devolves into, there's a lot of just kind of mishmash. But today we're kind of just going to go over the classic blade shapes and kind of, the uses that people typically would use that kind of blade shape for. So let's get right into it, and we're starting with drop point. And here we go. Here's our an example of 4 drop points. We got the Cold Steel 8015, the CJRB Pyrite, the Kaiser T1, and the Nick Riggy Jersey. So the definition of a drop point is a blade shape with an edge that curves upward to the point at a more pronounced angle than that which the spine curves down to meet the tip. So you can see we have the tip, we have the spine, and we have the edge. The edge, starts straight, and then it curves pretty drastically all the way up to the tip, whereas the spine just has a gradual kind of slope down towards the tip. That's what makes a drop point. It's basically, you got the spine, and then it drops down a bit to the tip. I would say it's probably the most common blade shape. Possibly spear point could be in there as well. It's just it's a really versatile blade shape. I have a lot of drop points. I think everybody has a lot of drop points. You have the belly for when you need it, but you also have a tip that's dropped down a little bit for utility cuts. Any kind of cutting on like a cutting board, flat surface. And it's just it's a blade shape that looks classic and just looks good. It's pleasing to the eye. You'll see drop points on a lot of traditional American knives, fixed blades, folding knives as well. All right, next up is spear points, and as you can see, I don't have a whole lot of true spear points. The definition of a spear point is the spine and the edge should both curve towards the point, more towards the point than at the handle, and not continuously. It kind of is more of an abrupt kind of slope down to the tip. And the spine and the edge do close to the same amount of curving down to the tip. Whereas the drop point, the spine kind of lazily drops to the tip and the belly comes up pretty quick. On a spear point, both the spine and the edge come and kind of both curve close to the same amount to the tip, which is usually kind of in the center line of the knife. So this is the Ohio Riverjack spear point, and this is a very true spear point. The tip is in line with the center of the knife. In fact, if we could get something like this, we can kind of draw across. The tip is pretty much in center line with the knife. This is the GEC number 78 American Jack, and same thing. And this one actually has a pen blade, which is a form of a spear point, kind of a variation. And then the drop bear. This one could be classified as a drop point. I think if it didn't have such a big swedge, it would look more like a spear point. But in my mind, it's a spear point because it doesn't really start sloping down to the tip until way out here. Almost, in my mind, I think of it as like a snub-nosed sort of drop point or a spear point. But the spine and the edge both are doing pretty much the same thing, and the tip is pretty in the center line of the knife. These are usually, they're good at slicing, but they can also pierce. And I think a lot of people like them because they're just nice and kind of symmetrical. It's a really kind of clean look. All right, next we got clip point, and this is my only clip point blade, and it's not even really a super clippy pointed blade, but this is my Case Medium Stockman. You guys know what a clip point is. It's the it has a curve of the edge towards the tip of the blade, but then there's a clipped section up here. Um, it's from the tip towards the handle side. It's kind of just a little area, kind of just clipped out up here, so it doesn't drop down. It kind of concavely clips out right in this area up here. Not a very good description, and I don't really have any examples. I wish I did. Now I'm thinking I need to buy a knife with a clip point just to at least have one. But there you go. With a clip point, you get belly, but also a pokey tip, and it's a really classic look. Next up is hawkbill or pruner. A hawkbill blade shape is basically a concave edge with a downward pointing tip, almost like a talon or a claw. This is more of a pruner. This one looks more like a hawkbill. It's a concave edge, and they can be difficult to sharpen unless you need a thin stone or rod possibly to sharpen these. This is the Kershaw Launch 10, I think. This is a really cool, super snappy USA-made Kershaw automatic. Aluminum handles, CPM 154 blade steel, and this is just a package destroyer, dude. It's such a fine tip that's pointing right down into whatever you're cutting. Very useful. And this is more of it's a hawkbill, but it's more of a pruner. These are used a lot in agriculture. And they kind of come from traditional knife patterns like the karambit or talon knives. They kind of, like I said, they kind of originated as agriculture tools. Good for pulling cuts, pruning trees and bushes, but also self-defense, which is kind of weird because they're just so good at like ripping in and tearing at stuff, which is kind of what you want in self-defense a lot of times. Next, one of my favorites, Wharncliffes, baby. Oh, yeah. So, Wharncliffes, this is a good example of a very classic Wharncliffe. They have straight edges and a spine that curves gradually down to meet the tip. These are really good at utility cutting and also slicing. Pretty much whenever you need a very fine tip for doing detail work down on a surface, that's what you want a Wharncliffe for. This is the Rough Rider work knife. A very, very good knife for very cheap. It's under $20 for this baby. Great walk and talk. It's got blue and black layered micarta handles. Not the best blade steel ever. I think it's 440, something like that. Maybe even a little bit worse. But it looks nice and it's very cheap. The Spyderco Delica, straight edge, spine that gently curves all the way down to the tip. This is the K390 Delica, and I love it. Titanium scales, deep carry MXG clip. One of my favorite knives ever, actually. It's just an unbelievably thin blade, great slicer. The Ohio Riverjack Wharncliffe, same thing, straight edge, spine that gradually. This one's less gradual. This could almost be a sheep's foot. But it's definitely more of a Wharncliffe than a sheep's foot. And the Spyderco Little Native Wharncliffe. Straight edge, gradual slope down to the tip. This is a great knife. It's a mini knife, but very snappy detent. Easy full grip on it, compression lock. Wire clip, G10. I want to get titanium on this eventually, but it's just so dang expensive. But this is a great knife. I think I like Wharncliffe so much because the two main types of cutting I do are utility cuts, cutting out cardboard templates, stuff like that, and slicing, breaking down cardboard, cutting through whatever material. So the Wharncliffe does great at both of those things. Sheep's foot, another of my favorites, very similar to a Wharncliffe, but we have less of a pokey tip on these. This is kind of an extreme example. You have usually a straight edge, same as a Wharncliffe, but they can have slight curvature. So you can see here we have slight curvature. Now the main difference is we don't have a gradually sloping spine down to the tip. We usually have kind of a gradual and then a pretty drastic drop down to the tip. That creates less of a point. This is the obviously the Winterblade Co. Factor. The CJRB Echo. This is a Wharncliffe with a little belly. You could probably call this a modified sheep's foot, just because it has more belly than sheep's foots usually have. But, you know, straight spine and then a pretty severe drop down to the tip. The Kaiser Towser S. Great sheep's foot. You know, same thing. Kind of a straight spine, then pretty severe drop down to the tip. And the Demco 8020.5. Sheep's foot, shark's foot, actually. This one's got a little bit of curvature too, and then, you know, the spine does a little kind of whoop-de-doo thing, and then severe drop down to the tip. So these are sometimes used by like EMTs or somewhere, like say you're cutting a seatbelt off of somebody that's stuck in a car accident or something. You want something to get behind the seatbelt that's not going to poke them. Sheep's foots are good for that because you can kind of get behind something without poking them, get behind it, and then pop a strap. Or say there's a strap around something that you don't want to damage the surface of. A lot of times you can kind of just get in there and you kind of slide along this hump right here, get in behind the thing, and then you can cut it, pop it that way. Yeah, just a situation where you don't want to poke it, you want to be careful. Sheep's foot's a good option. Great utility cutters, great slicers as well. All right, how about some Tantos? I only have 3. They aren't super useful in my day-to-day, but this one actually kind of is, and I'll explain why in a second. So a Tanto is characterized by you know, a long straight edge and then an abrupt angle up toward the tip. Now they originated in Japan, and the traditional Japanese Tanto is something more like this. Hold on, let me let the dog out. This is the Sharp by Design Apex Tanto. It's a little less of an abrupt angle here. You can see we have belly, and then there's an angle, but it's not like a bink, bink. It's more of a gradual angle with a dropped down tip. This is more of a Japanese style, not super Japanese, you know, definitely seen more Japanese-ish than this one, but it's less drastic than this one. This is the Tucson TS300, you know, straight edge, you know, there's a definite point right there where it transitions up to this edge. These are good for piercing and prying, pretty much, because they have strong tips most of the time. A lot of modern Tantos have hollow grinds here and flat up here, meaning that you have this area here to slice, and then you have a really thick tip for like piercing, prying, you know, stuff like that. This one's kind of an anomaly because it's a really low tip. This is the Tucson TS377. And this is my favorite Tanto that I've tried. It's an American Tanto, you know, it's got a straight edge, pretty noticeable abrupt tip. Then we got this angle, but it's a thin, this area up here is thin. It's not thick like they usually get. It's really thin here, and it's really thin here. And look how low this tip drops. I did a cut test video with this knife. Go watch it if you want. You will see that this does very good utility cuts, which I was really surprised to see. Utility cuts are not the strong suit of Tantos because, as you can see, to get all the way up to the tip, you have to raise up way up here to get to it. You know, way up here to be able to get to the tip for doing utility cutting. This one, it's dropped down so much, you don't have to lift up that much at all. And it's so thin that it does really well with utility cutting. So that's kind of an anomaly. It's not a super strong tip. Definitely not kind of a classic Tanto, but still very cool. Next up, trailing point or Persian style blades. This is the Tucson TS269, and it's the only trailing point knife that I own because it's just not useful for what I do. It's kind of the opposite of what I want. It's got a tip that's raised up real high, and that's the opposite of what I want. I want a nice low tip. But this is an exception because this is such a fantastic knife. This is Tucson's best knife. It's said by not only me, but also by people who have tried way more Tucsons than I have. Um, it's Tucson's best work. The fit and finish is incredible. It feels like a much, much more expensive knife than it is. It's $100 knife. It feels like I don't know, it could be like a $450 knife, upwards of that. It just feels so good. Um, these are for when you need a lot of belly, you know. The tip is up high, so you're not going to be doing stuff down on a flat surface. It's more of kind of when you need something for a rocking motion, maybe. Yes, I don't even really know because I don't do that kind of cutting. But if you need a lot of belly and a high tip, you'll get something like this, trailing point Persian style. And lastly, I've saved the best for last, at least my favorite, and that is leaf-shaped blade. Not really a traditional blade shape, but when you're talking about Spyderco, you kind of have to come up with your own new name for the blade shapes that they use because they're not really drop point, they're not really spear point. They're kind of their own thing because we have a very gradual slope all the way starting back here, all the way up to the tip. Some have a little more belly than others. The little native here has more than the Mannix. But they all, at least the ones on the table here, don't have very much at all. But a very dropped down tip, just not kind of traditionally how you would see it. This is one of my favorite blade shapes for a few reasons. Number one being it's a great slicer. There's not severe belly anywhere. It's kind of gradual the whole way. So it's not like you're slicing, and then you kind of get to this area where you might slip out if you had kind of abrupt, steep belly up to the tip. It kind of just keeps you in your slice a little bit better when you have just gradual belly, nothing severe up in towards the tip. Being that it's so gradual, the tip also usually stays really low. So it's almost the best of both worlds, kind of in having belly and not having belly. The Native 5 here, I think, is an example of a perfect EDC knife because the blade shape is just so versatile. You know, you have enough belly to where it's there when you need it. When you're cutting, you know, say you're cutting some rubber tubing down on a surface, you need a little bit of belly to be able to kind of rock on the surface and to cut what you're cutting through. This is perfect for that. But also the tip is so low, it's just so easy to get to it. It's kind of just feels natural. You grab the knife in a pinch grip, you put it down on a surface, and your tip is high enough, it's right where it's got to be. It's just, I really love them. Now, obviously, Spyderco has other blade shapes other than just leaf shape, but they're kind of known for their leaf shaped blades. But there are other companies that have leaf shaped blades. The CVV Cubit is one of them. This is a very Spyderco-ish looking blade, you know. Just very gradual slope down to a tip, you know. It's almost like it's almost like the spine is a Warncliffe, but the belly is a drop point-ish. Kind of, you know, it's got that kind of gradual sloped spine that a Warncliffe does, but with a little belly, like you'd see, I don't know, on a drop point or a modified sheep's foot or something. They're kind of their own thing, and I just really like them. And that's pretty much it. At least those are the main ones. There's a lot of variations, like I said. There's some kind of ones that could be a little bit of both, like a straight back. That's basically a drop point, but where the spine is just completely straight instead of dropping down. I don't have any examples of that. You know, there's a bunch of weird ones. But those are the main ones that you'll see. And as far as my favorites, like I said, the leaf-shaped blade really works good for me. And aside from that, I mean, a Warncliffe or a sheep's foot is really what I like. But, you know, you can't deny the classic just kind of sexiness of a nice, good, just good-looking drop point, you know? So there's a place in my heart for all of these blade shapes. But it just kind of depends on what kind of stuff you cut day to day. That's really going to dictate what kind of blade that you choose. And that's it, folks. Let me know in the comments what your favorite is, what you like to carry most. And like the video before you leave. I would very much appreciate it. Thanks for watching. I love you very much. I'll see ya soon. Adios.